I was just saying, Louis doesn't understand social distancing. So he goes up like wanting to cuddle everything, and particularly any babies younger than him.
For years, royal watchers have noticed something curious about Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. Compared to almost any other set of high-profile children on the planet, they appear astonishingly little. A few minutes on a palace balcony, a short walk to church at Christmas, a handful of official photographs, most of them taken not by paparazzi, but by their own mother. For a family whose every move is chronicled by a global press machine, this level of restraint is not an accident. It is a deliberate, carefully maintained policy, and the story of why it exists says as much about Prince William's own childhood as it does about his children's present. To understand the plan, you have to go back to September 1997, to a moment that is now etched into modern British history. A 15-year-old William walked behind his mother's coffin through the streets of London, watched by millions of people lining the route and hundreds of millions more on television. Princess Diana's death had already turned into a media event of almost unprecedented scale, and in the years that followed, details of her private life continued to surface in public. Her letters, her handwriting, her voice on old recordings, moments she had never intended for public consumption. William was a teenager watching his mother's private world get picked apart in real time, after she was no longer there to have any say in it. People close to the family have said for decades that this experience shaped nearly everything William later did as a parent. He has spoken publicly, if sparingly, about wanting his own children to have as normal a childhood as the position allows, and has been candid in select interviews about the toll that constant media exposure took on him and his brother growing up. By the time George was born in 2013, William and Catherine had already begun shaping an approach that would carry through the births of Charlotte in 2015 and Louis in 2018. Rather than granting the press ongoing access, the family narrowed the children's public appearances to a short, predictable list. The Trooping the Color balcony appearance, the walk to Christmas Day service at Sandringham, occasional attendance at events like the Wimbledon Final or the Platinum Jubilee pageant, and staged photographs released on birthdays, often taken by Catherine herself using her own camera. This was widely reported as a conscious strategy, and it produced a genuinely unusual outcome for children of their profile. No long-lens photographs of them having a meltdown in a supermarket, no doorstep of the school gates, no birthday photographs sold to tabloids without the family's consent. Kensington Palace has, at various points, made informal agreements with UK media organizations asking that the children be allowed to attend school and go about ordinary life without being photographed. And by most accounts, those requests have largely been honored within Britain, even if overseas outlets and social media have been less restrained. Prince Louis, as the youngest, has occupied a slightly different role within this system than his older siblings. George, as second in line to the throne, has always been understood to be, eventually, a public figure by necessity, and coverage of him has often carried an undertone of watching a future king in training. Charlotte, third in line, has increasingly been described in coverage as a poised, composed presence at official events as she's gotten older. Louis, further removed from the pressures tied directly to succession, has largely been allowed simply to be a young child in public, and that is precisely what has made him such a recognizable figure despite appearing far less often than his siblings. His unfiltered facial expressions during the 2022 Platinum Jubilee celebrations, visibly bored, occasionally silly, at one point covering his mother's mouth with his hand, went viral around the world and turned him into something of an internet phenomenon almost overnight. It was a moment that captured what makes Louis different from a lot of royal children who came before him. He has not yet learned, or been taught, to perform composure for the cameras, and the public has responded warmly to that authenticity. That contrast, a child who is instantly beloved specifically because he hasn't been media trained, set against parents whose entire philosophy is built on limiting exposure, created a tension that became impossible to ignore during 2024, a year that tested the family's approach to privacy more severely than any point since Diana's death. In January of that year, Catherine underwent planned abdominal surgery, and the palace initially gave only limited details, saying she would be away from public duties until after Easter. What followed was one of the more chaotic periods in recent royal media history. In the absence of a fuller explanation, speculation filled the vacuum almost immediately, ranging from the mundane to the wildly conspiratorial. fueled in part by a photograph of Catherine and her children, released by Kensington Palace for Mother's Day, that several international photo agencies withdrew after identifying signs of digital editing. Catherine later posted a short video statement in which she said the family had asked for time and space, and acknowledged the manipulated photo had been her own edit done, she said, as many amateur photographers occasionally do. The controversy briefly overshadowed the far more serious news that would follow weeks later. In March 2024, Catherine revealed in a recorded video statement that she had been diagnosed with cancer and was undergoing preventative chemotherapy, information she said she and William had needed time to explain properly to their children before making it public. That sequence of events is genuinely instructive, because it shows both the strength and the real limitation of the family's usual approach to privacy. Their instinct, rooted in decades of experience with an unforgiving press, has always been to say as little as possible for as long as possible. In ordinary circumstances, tied to things like school starts or minor scheduling changes, that approach has worked well and protected the children from unwanted scrutiny. But in a situation involving a serious health diagnosis, the same instinct towards silence collided with a public that was already primed to notice any deviation from the family's usual visible rhythms, and the resulting information gap was filled not with patience, but with rumor. Catherine's own statement acknowledged this directly, framing her decision to speak as being driven in large part by protecting her children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, from learning about her diagnosis anywhere other than from their own parents. She has since spoken, in a handful of subsequent public appearances and statements throughout 2024 and into 2025, about the emotional weight that period placed on the whole family, describing needing to feel grounded again after finishing her course of treatment, and about how differently she and William see the world in its aftermath. What makes Louis's position within all of this particularly worth examining is his age relative to that ordeal. He was around 6 years old when his mother's diagnosis became public, young enough that his parents had to make careful decisions about how much he could understand and when. Reporting from that period, drawing on royal correspondence with long-standing sourcing inside the household, indicated that Catherine and William made a point of explaining the diagnosis to all three children directly and age-appropriately before any public statement went out, precisely because they did not want George, Charlotte, or Louis discovering something so significant from a television screen or a classmate. That detail says something important about how this family actually approaches privacy. It isn't secrecy for its own sake, and it isn't about hiding uncomfortable truths from the children themselves. It's about controlling the order in which information reaches people, prioritizing the family's own understanding of a situation before the wider public gets any version of it at all, however incomplete. Since completing her treatment, Catherine has returned to public duties at a gradual pace, and by most accounts from royal correspondence has been notably selective about which engagement she takes on, weighing public appearances against family time in a way that associates close to her have described as a genuine shift in priorities following 2024. William, for his part, has continued to speak in general terms, in occasional interviews and speeches, about wanting to modernize aspects of royal life without abandoning the core instinct to protect his children's early years from public consumption. He has pointed, more than once, to his own adolescence as the model he is actively trying not to repeat. Constant photographers outside Eden, tabloid speculation about his teenage relationships, a level of scrutiny that both he and Prince Harry have separately described in later years as having left lasting marks on them. None of this means the family's approach has been without criticism. Some commentators and royal historians have argued that an institution funded significantly by public money owes the public a reasonable degree of transparency about the people who may one day represent the country, and that an overly guarded approach risks fueling exactly the kind of speculation the 2024 health crisis demonstrated. Others counter that children, regardless of their family's public role, have not consented to that scrutiny and deserve the same protections any parent would want for them. That debate remains genuinely unresolved, and it resurfaces periodically whenever Louis, George, or Charlotte make a rare public appearance and draw an outsized amount of attention relative to how little the public actually sees of them the rest of the year. What can be said with confidence, based on the public record rather than speculation, is this: the limited visibility of Prince William and Princess Catherine's children is neither accidental nor mysterious. It traces directly back to William's own experience of losing his mother amid overwhelming media attention, and it has been implemented consistently since well before any of the children were born. Lewis, as the family's youngest and least burdened by the direct weight of succession, has become an unusually beloved public figure almost by accident, precisely because the rare glimpses the public does get of him tend to be unscripted and genuine rather than staged. And the events of 2024 revealed both why the family's instinct toward privacy exists and the real cost of applying it too rigidly when the public, rightly or not, feels entitled to some explanation. Whether that balance shifts as George moves closer to adulthood and eventually toward his own constitutional role remains to be seen, but for now, the pattern that has defined Lewis's childhood so far looks likely to continue. Brief, memorable appearances, long stretches out of view, and a family still working out, in real time, how much of itself it owes to the public that watches it.